Why here? Why did Jesus choose this wedding to perform his first earthly miracle? Throughout the Bible, firsts often carry deep meaning. God uses first moments to signify changes in direction, marks of new beginnings, or the inauguration of new phases of his plans. We see this in Genesis at humanity's first breath. We see it as the first Passover leads Israel into freedom. And here at a wedding in Cana, we see Jesus launching the first sign of his public works that will culminate in redemption. With one swift and remarkable command, Jesus transformed ordinary water into extraordinary wine. But he wasn't simply averting a hospitality crisis, he was revealing his glory. This unassuming miracle marked an inauguration, the beginning of signs that would point unmistakably to Jesus' true identity. It marked the pivot between the private life of a carpenter's son and the launching of his public works of wonder, confirming prophetically his place as humanity's long-awaited Messiah. As Jesus transformed water into 180 gallons of the finest wine ever tasted, he wasn't fixing an embarrassing catering mishap. He was telegraphing hope, declaring that redemption's first breath, that wine of true joy, was now flowing freely for all who come to him thirsty and drinking only of this world's paltry substitutes. For all present, and for his disciples especially, this first sign builds a scaffold of deeper belief in Jesus, setting the stage for him to completely reconstruct human hearts by his life, death, and resurrection. It's noteworthy that Jesus performed his first miracle not on the grand steps of the Jerusalem temple, but quietly in the intimate setting of a small-town wedding. Jesus, his mother Mary, and all his disciples had been invited to share in the celebration of this peasant bride and groom. Likely they were friends or family known to Jesus. Perhaps he even grew up and played with the bride and groom as a child. So when Mary comes to Jesus saying they have no more wine, it's not just a catering crisis. It's a personal, even heartbreaking situation for this newly married couple struggling to fund adequate provisions for their own wedding. Not only would running out of wine embarrass them financially, but the ended feast could symbolize shame or bad luck over their marriage. And Jesus cares. This family setting and familiarity prompts his compassion and willingness to respond. But beyond feeling empathy for friends, Jesus seizes this real-life event to launch his public ministry aimed at redeeming all relationships and all of human life. In this intimate locale enveloped with friends, Jesus summons the servants to fill 6 stone jars used for ritual cleansing. When the steward bewilderedly tastes fine wine emerging from a jar brimming only with water just moments before, wonder begins to bloom. Through this miraculous sign, Jesus makes the glory of God's own presence physical, close and real for those gathered under Cana's roof, and for all who will one day abide in the household of his salvation. In the midst of this wedding celebration, we get a glimpse of Jesus' humanity. When the wine runs out, Jesus sees the brewing embarrassment on the faces of his host. In first-century Judea, running out of wine at your wedding could signal that you failed to adequately provide for guests. A social crisis for this new couple hoping to start their marriage off right. Rather than making a scene with overt miracles drawing attention to himself, Jesus compassionately meets this ordinary need for more wine by turning 6 stone jars of water into the finest tasting wine anyone there had sampled. Discreetly averting catastrophe, Jesus reveals his heart for meeting everyday people right where they are. God could unleash various global miracles and displays of power, parting seas, raining manna from heaven, writing luminescent messages in the night sky. But instead, behind the scenes in the quiet embarrassment of a local peasant wedding, Jesus uses his divine power to meet practical human needs, not just spectacular shows of his existence. In this commonplace context, Jesus dignifies the mundane by launching the inaugural flashes of his glory and power, confirming that God himself cares about practical everyday realities of typical families and relationships. In Cana, Jesus doesn't just save this party, but begins to restore all of human existence by attending first not to impressive public problems, but in quiet compassion to the acute lack of wine at a small-town wedding. This small, practically motivated miracle quietly tore open the veil between heaven and earth. In ways beyond human comprehension, Jesus commanded molecules rearranging at his spoken will. Water transformed to wine in an instant. But the true miracle was not refreshment for a weary party. It pointed to refreshment for every soul made weary by fruitless striving in a broken world. This sign revealed Jesus' hidden glory as much more than a humble carpenter's son, but as the long-awaited Son of God come to remake the world by redeeming humanity. We can imagine the awed shock in the moment when the servants drew fine wine out of those stone pots, just filled with water minutes earlier. When the disciples witnessed Jesus turn water to wine, fear, awe, joy, and belief were sparked afresh. They had dropped their nets and begun following Jesus recently. They believed the ancient prophecies told of Emmanuel, God with us, coming to live again among his people. Now, as Creator God himself surprised this small town celebration, he reinforced for his followers exactly who Jesus is. The incarnate deity able to transform not only water, but soon sin itself when his blood would flow to cleanse all who believe. This glorious creative miracle was a sign launching Jesus' public ministry, and a sign bolstering his disciples' faith just beginning, soon to blaze across history and around the globe, even until today. The meaning behind the miracle at Cana. When Jesus performed his first miraculous sign, quietly transforming water into wine at this unassuming wedding feast, he used an intimate, familiar setting to launch his public revelation of glory to the world. In Cana, Jesus seized an embarrassing practical need to display his compassion and power. He dignified a common family celebration by inaugurating his miracles in their midst. He reinforced his identity to his disciples while deepening their faith. And he set the stage for the greater signs, wonders, and personal sacrifices he would soon make to redeem all people who trust in him. This small-town wedding marked the beginning of Jesus' public ministry because it was a perfect, meaningful backdrop to reach familiar friends in need, perform a practical miracle meeting everyday needs, give a glimpse of his glory in an intimate locale, and bolster the belief of his closest followers who would soon carry the message of Christ to the waiting world. At Cana, jars used for ritual cleansing ran over with new wine as Jesus hinted at the greater cleansing from sin and refreshment for weary souls he would accomplish on humanity's behalf. This first miraculous sign launched faith, hope, and God's redeeming plan to restore and renew all relationships and all of human life by the everyday miracle of who Jesus is.